Welcome to Only Ghosts in the Building. This is your host, Emily Claire.
And Karen Lynn.
And happy 25th episode!
Wow, I can't believe already.
Boom,
We're at
baby.
number 25. Wow. How many months are we talking about? Since January?
January.
Yeah.
We went from winter to
Yeah, it feels like a lot
super
longer
hot.
than that because we've been putting a lot of work in on this.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's a lot more work than I expected it, and I'm not even doing most of the work.
You're doing it. You're doing like 25%.
I guess I'm about a quarter of a ghost. So anyway, we had an idea to do something different for this episode because it's sort of like our episode.
Yeah. Nobody else, no interviews, just us doing the do.
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes because we're not used to doing it. So we decided we're going to tell some ghost stories we've read.
Yes.
That other people have written and we haven't particularly investigated. But we thought it's interesting.
So, sprinkle allegedly all over this.
So I chose the Big Book of Maryland Ghost Stories.
Maryland.
And this is by Ed Okinowitz. Okinowitz.
I want to, why do I think Okinawa? Is that Japan?
Yeah, but I don't think he's Japanese.
I think that's more of a Polish.
It's a Polish name. And actually he was from Wilmington, Browntown area, which I think was a cultural area back then. So when he was born. So,
and we've known about him
for a long time.
For a long time.
Because he's been a folklore and, he talked at the library in Elkton, and I know he's given different lectures around.
And we used to live near him.
Yeah. He was around the area, I guess, at the time, because he's just a few years older than I was. So, I didn't know him, but I worked at the university for a while.
Yeah.
There's some overlap. And he grew up, he lived in Fair Hill.
Listen, Trucks, shut up.
He actually retired and then taught courses on folklore, storytelling, communications, and writing at the University of Delaware after he retired. I think through the adult education section as well. And then he used to do the walking tour, history of the area. He has a lot of basic knowledge, but he also has a lot of background in historical knowledge of the area, which leads to his interesting story. He really actually knows around the area. But anyway, altogether, he's written 20 books. And some of them are ghost stories. Some of them are just history. And he's written murder mystery books, which I would really like to read.
Cool.
Going back to October of 1992, he actually worked for the News Journal, which is the local Wilmington newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And he did fluff columns for them.
A fluff piece.
Like local interest type stories.
Well, that's nice. People need to know nice things.
Yeah, so he wasn't like on the beat reporter. He would write stories for them, and I don't know whether he did it in conjunction with the University of Delaware or whether this was a separate job. But he had several jobs over the course of his lifespan. And his first story, he was given an assignment by his boss, and it was in October of 1992. His boss said, you have to go do a Halloween story. Covered sort of information about different types of Halloween things where you go and, get scared and walk through the maze.
The haunted houses.
Yeah.
The haunted attractions.
Haunted attractions. So he thought it was something like that, and he said, well, I've done that before, and this guy says, no, there's something specific I want you to go do.
Yeah.
And so he gave them an assignment his first assignment for this type of ghost story type.
Holly Hall.
No, but he does have Holly Hall.
Yeah, I know. That was always the big known one.
And this is called the Pit of Ashley Manor. The Ashley Manor is in the area where the Susquehanna, it's west of the Elk River near the Susquehanna.
Okay.
But before we get to that, one of the things I found interesting, his take on the ghost stories of the area, because of the history here. In his introduction in this book, he writes that the land was here, and while the earth is silent and doesn't keep written records, the land never forgets. Some events, good things and bad things, achievements worth celebrating and tragedies best forgotten, leave an indelible legacy at their locations, a mark or a message that can be retrieved sometime in the future. And the essence of those private and public deeds have become the basis for stories we tell, especially ghost stories. He lives actually in the northeast corner of Maryland, where he lived there, in the Fair Hill area, yes. And a short walk within the Mason-Dixon line. So the Mason-Dixon line the markers separate Maryland and Pennsylvania. The significance of that is who the states paid taxes to. They had to identify where people that lived in the area either paid taxes to William Penn or to the English crown, you know, because Lord Calvert and all of that. So
Calvert County.
Some people were paying taxes in both.
Yeah.
So a lot of Maryland counties are named for English, like Lord Calvert and Cecil and, you know, Queen Mary, and, you know, there's Caroline, and all of these counties were named for people of the crown. And Pennsylvania, not so much. They were more Quaker.
Yes.
William Penn.
Yes.
So they were settled more by Quakers. So to keep from having to pay double taxes, they had Mason and Dixon come and map out the area that defines Maryland and Pennsylvania, and of course Delaware, because Delaware's kind of thrown into that little triangle area that's called Top of the Wedge.
Top of the wedgie.
Yeah, we used to call it, every time we went past, it was a wedgie when you were kids. It turns out that Mason and Dixon, when they were here, because they started from that area, hung out at Deer Park Tavern.
Yeah!
Which was called St. Patrick's Tavern, I think, or something like that, before it became the Deer Park.
Well, I wonder what it was when good old Edgar Allan Poe was there.
I think that was the Deer Park. I think he was after this period of time, so it would
Eddie Allen.
Yeah.
Poe.
Yeah. Which there is a story in this book about his grave in Baltimore.
Yeah. At which we have visited.
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
Mason-Dixon had this big entourage of people, and they hung out in the area. He was very interested in that history. Looking at the stones, you can actually see the Mason-Dixon, the stones and it goes all the way down to western Maryland. It doesn't stop in the northeastern area. Also, a number of stories that were found in old books, historical documents, both faded and modern newspaper clippings, and of course the internet, historical society file cabinets, library special collection shelves, scraps of paper, handwritten notes. So he went through all of this stuff to get his historical part of his stories. And then, of course, there were the ghost parts of it when he went to do personal interviews of people that may have been in the area. The region is the foundation for many of the stories, from the Revolution to the Civil War, from the Underground Railroad to the War of 1812. And then, of course, it goes from the Chesapeake Bay all the way out to the Allegheny Mountains. He said he was asked whether he actually believes in ghosts. And he said, his answer is, I believe there is something that is unseen, unusual, and at times very evil, and that does exist. I believe there is a very limited number of people who, for whatever reason, were born with a psychic gift, or who have developed the ability to communicate with or sense that others cannot. But these gifted individuals are few in number. I also believe there are many people who see what they want to see, who have very active imaginations, and who desperately wish they could encounter a ghost or experience a paranormal event. After talking to hundreds of people that have shared their unusual and sometimes troubling unexplained experiences, my advice to anyone who wants an up-close and personal encounter with the other side is be careful what you wish for. So that starts out his book. He got stuck with this story. His boss wanted him to go to this place called Ashley Manor and interview the people that lived there, because they had heard that there were some interesting things there. The editor said, I need an unusual Halloween story, and I figure you're the one that can come up with just the right article. And I need it yesterday. So,
and I need it yesterday.
Said, how about another spooky trail or corn maze expose? And he said, no way, my boss snapped as if anticipating my response. I know what I want, and it's a story about a haunted house. Then he paused a second and stressed in a commanding tone, a real haunted house. He went to Ashley Manor, and it's kind of south of Elkton. It's not that close to Elkton. It's considered, I guess, the Eastern Shore, but I would think it's like the northern Eastern Shore part. And it's the home of Clayton and Caroline and their children. The family had moved to Cecil County about 10 years earlier and had purchased the 3-story, 22-room federal-style mansion.
Yikes.
A predominant county landowner and Maryland state delegate had erected the structure in the early 1800s. And then it was originally on a plantation of more than 500 acres, but then, of course, most of it got sold off, and it was still on a 3-acre plot, overlooking the banks of a Cecil County creek west of the Elk and north of the Sassafras. The locals called the spit of land a neck, a slender slice of marsh and farmland that seems to reach out toward the wide part of the river. So he pulled into the gravel driveway. I guess he found the place, pulled into the driveway, and a man and woman were standing on the porch. And they were dressed in costumes. He was in a pirate costume, and she was in like a colonial type costume. And the newspaper's photographer was just leaving. And he said he glanced back at the owners, looked at me, and said, that place is a nightmare. He said, what do you mean? And holding his camera toward my face, he said in a frustrated voice, I had to make 3 trips out to my van to replace the batteries. The flash worked fine outside, but as soon as I entered into the house, the power died. And the owners, they're a real pair, he said, rolling his eyes. So I guess they have some personality. But that's very common, right? Ghost batteries going low, that's pretty typical.
Samuel Miller, my battery went.
Yes, everybody complains that their battery dies very quickly.
I had problems with my camera at Pennhurst, and then where were we after that? After that one, Fort Mifflin.
Fort Mifflin, yes.
I could not. It kept giving me error, and that I had never seen before. And it was like
it wasn't working.
Your battery is having a problem. It didn't even say it was dead. It was like just error.
Yes, just error messages. So that's very common.
It works now.
So you turned it on after that?
I redid the battery. I charged it and everything. So that's wild. So, all right, he knows.
So he did say that. It says, they say haunted places, the spirits will drain the energy out of power sources, suck them dry. That's why camcorders and tape recorders and cameras seem to go dead at the moment that something exciting happens. Mm-hmm. The photographer said, I'm not coming back, so we're going to take what I got. And that's it. Don't call me. I'll call you. Have a nice time chatting up with your friends in their haunted house. So he went and saw Clayton looked like a pirate in gleaming black boots and dark red trousers. He wore gray unbuttoned vest atop his white fluffy cuffed shirt. A gold and blue scarf accented his open collar. So he was dressed as a pirate. I don't know why.
It's Halloween.
Maybe that's it. I don't know. But that's what they did for the photo shoot. I guess he dressed that way for some reason.
Okay.
And then she was wearing a full-length gold gown. On her fingers were several large stones. An ornate mother-of-pearl comb was affixed to the back of her hair. And they told him that they had spent hours and significant amount of money restoring the home. They had a bunch of historical objects within the house and all kinds of collections. There were musket balls and swords and all kinds of things that they had collected over the years. And they were in the process of redoing the home back to a traditional type colonial home.
That's awesome.
He said he went in and said, it's really fun, but what about the ghosts? And they responded by leading me to the parlor and stopping at one corner where Clayton carefully picked up a narrow glass cabinet door that had been resting against the side of a large armchair. The surface was covered with dust, but you could see the ripples in the ancient glass, handmade more than a century ago. The couple had planned to refinish the piece and replace it back into their bookcase that stood above the antique desk, and they said the glass panel had rested for more than 5 years at the back of an unused closet for safekeeping. As Clayton turned the panel, he pointed toward the top corner. Boldly written in script lettering, one could read the words that were partially hidden by a fine layer of dust. "Please help me."
Ugh.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it?
That's creepy.
So Clayton said he thinks it's a message from a spirit trapped in the house. But they don't know which one, because apparently there are several. So they started out with the usual noises, crashing at the middle of the night, footsteps walking the hall, the smell of tobacco, although no one smoked in the house, and the distinct smell of roses in the parlor, or the dining, what they call the dining room. It used to be a parlor, often in winter when there wouldn't be any, fresh flowers around. And then cat footprints traveling up a hanging wall mirror, and animals scratching outside the master bedroom door. And that started the night that the family cat was killed on the road in front of the house.
Aww.
Yep.
Stop.
You want to go back in? So let me in. Scratch, scratch, scratch.
I don't like that.
Scratch, scratch, scratch.
Okay, move on.
Okay, and voices calling out unfamiliar names, conversations originating from the front porch in an unknown language, and chilling, sinister laughs. I told him I was approaching ghost overload and asked them to start at the beginning.
Yeah, like that's like a lot to just be like,
yeah.
Bleh, here you go.
So apparently, like, they didn't realize it was haunted when they moved in, when they bought the house. And shortly after, they were at a local general store getting gas, and the attendant said, "You must be the folks that moved into the old haunted house." They're like, "What?" And they thought he was just kidding because, it was in bad shape and it looked kind of haunted, but they didn't think it was haunted.
No, for real.
So then after they moved in, Carolyn was home and heard footsteps walking along the hallway and coming down the stairs towards her, and she told him, "Go away. I don't know who you are, but we're going to be living together, so you might as well all plan to get along. So leave me alone right now. I'm busy unpacking my things." So she said, "Back up."
Yeah, boundaries. Healthy boundaries.
So the footstep stops and didn't resume that day. But when she told Clayton, he didn't believe it. He said she had an overly active imagination, and there were some reasons for it, and don't tell anybody else because they'll think you're crazy, and the usual denial type stuff. And then she said, "Fine, but you'll find out." And then apparently he did. There's a basement that he used as a shop, and it had a side door, and it goes with narrow stone steps, and they went down, and it was kind of quiet outside, but because there's no traffic, they're kind of away, but it's really quiet when you go in there. It's just that one entrance and exit where his workbench is, where he's doing work for the house, doing things. He pointed to a locked door. It was a triple locked with a small opening similar to a narrow slit in a jail door. A small metal slot could be slid aside, and the thin opening would allow a narrow object to be passed through it. So he asked what's in there, and Clayton said, "We don't go in there. I'm careful not to open it very often." They say it was the screaming room where they punished the bad slaves.
Ugh.
So here's the quiet basement, and they had this special room with a metal door with a slit in it like a jail door that they used allegedly for slaves. And he said, "Do you really want to know why I don't go in there?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, late one night, He said rather quietly, "I was working here and felt something like a sudden chill in the air. I looked up to my left toward the door, which is the only way in and out of here, and I saw a black cloaked figure standing in the doorway. It was blocking my way out. The thing, whatever it was, just looked at me. It was all fuzzy, cloudy, and it had most piercing red and green eyes." Red and green eyes.
Yeah.
The figure seemed to begin moving, floating directly toward me, and those eyes, they actually bored right into my chest. The heat was unbearable. I thought I couldn't breathe. Then, just as I knew I was going to pass out, the cloaked figure began floating sideways, eventually going right through the screaming room door, and it was gone. That's why I try not to spend too much time down here, especially at night, unless I have some company like you. So Ed said after that story, he was ready to go. While he was there, he saw a hole in the floor, and it seemed to be a well, and the opening was about 5 feet square, and he guessed it was about 12 feet deep at one time, and it seemed like it should have a fence or railing around it because it was just an open pit in the floor. Apparently that was one of the things that they wondered about too, and what it was used for. And he said they found some relics in the pit, some broken shards of pottery and buttons and arrowheads and musket balls and things like that. But he said he found out the story of the hole during a yard sale his family was holding about 2 years ago after they settled in. And he said that he had not told anyone about the strange experiences they had endured since their arrival. In truth, he said they found most of the unexplained events either annoying or intriguing, but never horrifying or threatening. And then while they had this stuff displayed for sale outside, he said some woman came by and said, "I guess you have a lot of ghosts in there." And he said, "Yeah, we might have one or two." And suddenly a well-dressed woman who was looking over some items in a nearby table snapped in a sharp voice, "You've got a lot more than one or two in there." Surprised, Clayton took care of the man and immediately ran to the woman's side, asking her what she had meant by that remark and demanding more information. And the well-dressed woman ignored his question, began walking to her car, and he pursued her, trying to get some more details. And finally, the stranger turned, pointed directly at Clayton's face, and said, "You know that hole in your cellar?" And he said, "Yes, the well." And she said, "It's not a well. That's the pit where they used to hang the disobedient slaves." Clayton was too stunned to ask for more details, and the woman got into her car and drove away. It took him a few seconds to recover from the news, and when he looked up, she was gone. It's like she vanished. So they closed up the yard sale and went about their business. But then they ran into the people they bought the house from, and they said, "Why didn't you tell us it was haunted?" And the couple said, "Well, we wouldn't have been able to sell it if we said that." And they said they discussed the building's former residents, and they shared their common ghostly experiences. So that the older couple they were in their 80s at that point, lived in the house more than 40 years. So they had been there for quite a while. The strong scent of flowers was traced back to the days when the dining room had been used as a parlor where deceased relatives had been laid out for 3-day wakes.
Oh.
So back in the day, when you had your wake, you had to kind of disguise the
smell.
The smell.
Yeah.
So that's why the strong flower odor was in the parlor, or what they used as a dining room.
I still like even the smelliest, beautiful flowers.
Like
wouldn't
lilies.
cover
I wouldn't think so. And, I think people used to they use them now, lilies is a symbol. And I'm kind of wondering if that got that start because they're such a pungent smell. I know you don't worry about it these days, but back in the day, maybe they had used, different flowers that were very strong.
Interesting.
As a cover-up. But anyway, and then the unfamiliar language they said were slaves who spoke an unfamiliar dialect and discussed topics they didn't want the masters to hear. And the smell of smoke was remnant of the original builder, who was never seen anywhere without his constantly lit pipe. The couple left. They said they didn't tell anyone because, first of all, no one would have bought the property. But the others said people would have considered them crazy old coots and tried to put them away because, they're in their 80s. And that was like, okay.
That's why we do this. Breaks that stigma.
So anyway, that's pretty much the gist of the story. He asked him why they hadn't had some kind of psychic come in or a priest to try to bless their home or suggest ways to get rid of the ghosts. And they said things have been bearable. They were more annoying than evil, and they were afraid that if a psychic or a priest drove them from the house, then something even darker would have taken their place. So they didn't want to chance it. And they eventually did. He came back several years after that. They did sell the home, I guess, or had it up for sale. The subsequent owner told me the pit in the cellar story was a sensational tale with little substance, and he never felt ill at ease in the home. So he didn't have any problem with it. There was a pesky child spirit that seemed to enjoy stomping up and down the stairs or rattling the door handle as if demanding to be let out of a certain room.
Jonas.
The owner said he solved the problem by leaving the door open so the ghost could move around with ease.
That's Jonas.
So that's all for that story.
Wow.
So I don't know.
Do you know where this is?
I don't. It doesn't say exactly where it is. So
okay.
No, I don't know. It's somewhere in Cecil County, but it must be lower, like Cecilton.
Road trip.
There's a lot. If we're going to do road trips, there's so many road trips in this
book. Oh yeah, let's do them.
And that's just one of
many.
20 that he's written.
I know.
So I'm sure there's some overlap, but I thought that was very interesting. And the fact that it was his first story and he got such a good story.
Yeah.
Now, he didn't have any specific experiences
right
in the house, and that was all related personal stories. So there wasn't anything scientific except the batteries on the camera. But there's really nothing more specific than that he had to say. So again, yes, is it overactive imagination, or they just...
I mean, the guy sounds like he's psychic. I mean, they both seem like they have gifts, but like having that man in the basement...
That was creepy, and I'm not sure I would even go back down in that basement after I saw something like that. Are you kidding me?
Right. Right. But I want to touch on the fact that Ed was saying that there's not a lot of people that have these gifts, but I think there are. I think there's just people don't either talk about it or more people are awakening.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
So this is the question I have about psychics.
Yes.
Okay, so psychics pick up on people's experiences. So what if you have an experience that you maybe not be true, but you think it is because you went to some place and you got touched by a ghost or something, and you're kind of feeling that way about something, and a psychic says, oh yes, this place is haunted because you were there and you got touched by a ghost, but maybe it's your imagination and not really their imagination. So are they picking up on what you're feeling?
Yeah.
And that's the thing I was thinking about in the basement of Samuel Miller House, and Morgan feeling all of the things that she was feeling. I know a lot of it was verifiable.
Yeah.
But was she also picking up what we were feeling?
Right. And the thing with Morgan is that tale had been told a couple of times with psychics already.
Right.
And like Debbie didn't know. She didn't see the murder part. She just saw kicking
because
and boots.
She wanted to keep that out of her realm.
And then Tony had his whole experience, and Amy had her experience.
And then was Morgan picking up on their experiences?
See, that's what that's my one main question is, what's the difference between psychics and mediums? And I feel like I think a lot of people are just psychic, and they're not actually talking to the other side. They're picking up what's happening to them around them. Like
from the person in the room.
Right. So, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that, there's a key, there's a bird, feather, like all those things. And they're picking it up from the person and not from the other side.
Right.
But then there's other things like when we had our messages from Debbie, those aren't verifiable to us. Like the whole my father thing, I don't know. So she's picking up that
but I wasn't thinking about anything like that.
Right. Well, it doesn't matter. They're not thinking what you're thinking. They're picking up your energy and what you hold in your psychicness, in your aura.
Even though I wouldn't have been specifically thinking about those things, then I would think that if I were, and she was psychic enough to know what I was thinking. Right. But I'm not even thinking about it.
Right.
And she's saying things that I had to think about to remember.
Right.
That was
the case. Yeah. So I think there is a difference, and I think maybe, I don't know, what did she say? Not all psychics are mediums, but all mediums are psychic.
Okay.
I think that's the phrase that she used.
Yeah. So that's where I'm kind of having a little bit of questioning. Not that I question either of them, because I think they're real, but where are they picking it up from?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's...
Well, and that's the thing from all this stuff is use your judgment. Always be discerning, be skeptical. You have to come in it with a constructive thought process and not just believe everything, but also have an open mind about it.
Right. Well, like I always say, suspend disbelief. Enjoy what your experience is, and then go back and evaluate to see what you can really verify. Just don't believe everything that you think that you see or feel or hear. Right. So yes, because your mind is, does play tricks. So that was just something I thought of that I wanted to talk about, is like, how do you know where that information is coming from? Is it really coming from that place, or is it coming from the people around? The next one I have is called Blacksmith's Revenge, and it's a pretty quick story. It's more in our area near Fair Hill. So it was...
we don't live there anymore, but that's where we used to live.
We used to live. I grew up there and moved away and then came back to the similar area. So it was always kind of an area, it said Fair Hill, which was closer to the Pennsylvania line than to Elkton. It's northern Cecil County. Again, it's in the northeast corner of the state. Strange and eerie things also occur at night, and that's when the Tri-State's restless ghost rider appears. During colonial times, a rich man lived at Fair Hill. He owned several plantations and was an official of the Maryland government. He was rich, older, prominent, and rarely in good spirits. He was old grump. At the age of 65, he married a young, beautiful woman who was only in her 20s, and she was confined to her master's home and was told her main job was to wait for her master to return from his business trips, which were lengthy and numerous. So here's this 20-year-old stuck, and of course, master, you have to do what the master says.
Ugh.
Yeah, really. Then the young bride, who we'll call Mary, I'm not sure that's her real name, but that's what he called her, kept begging the master to take her along with his travels. And she wanted to go see Annapolis and meet with other people and get out of the house. He didn't want to take her, so she's stuck at home. And she took care of the grounds and became friendly with the plantation blacksmith. The strong young man was closer to her age, and he worked in the shop not far from the main house. Eventually, the blacksmith accompanied Mary on walks, and then they went on picnics, and, they sat on the front porch of the mansion and hung out, and, of course, they fell in love. he was going to head west to start new life in the frontier. And he asked Mary to go with him. And at first she refused, but then she thought about it. And a couple weeks later, she had some fights with her husband. She decided she was going to leave him and get out of here, go with her lover. And knowing that the master would never allow her to go, Mary began to make plans to run away with her new love while the master was away on business. The two lovers packed a small wagon with supplies and early one morning were walking out the manor house door. The blacksmith was carrying Mary's belongings when her husband unexpectedly rode into the courtyard. Uh-oh, got caught. And he, of course, the master, her husband, was enraged, and at first he thought that the blacksmith was, abducting her, and she was trying to escape, but then he realized his wife was escaping him, and he jumped down from his horse, hit the wife, and threw her to the ground, and he pulled out his whip and hit his wife across the back. As the blacksmith ran forward to defend his lover, the master pulled out a pistol and shot the young man in the chest.
Cool guy.
The shocked wife crawled toward her lover and held his dying body in her arms. Crying, she announced that she would not leave the dying blacksmith. The master, still enraged, whipped her across the back and neck until her skin was raw and her blood ran together with her dead lover's. The young woman died on the spot as a result of the beating. Of course, they had slaves, so the slaves saw this, and the master chased them away, except for his most trusted servant, Lucas. And Lucas picked up the woman, and the master told her he was taking her into the house to nurse her back to health. But, of course, she didn't make it. And Lucas dug a hole near the side of the blacksmith shop and dropped the two bodies inside, standing upright and facing each other. That way they can stare at each other until the end of the world, snarled the master. They covered over the bodies with dirt, and the master directed Lucas to place a large tree stump and huge iron anvil directly on top of the hole. This, he decided, would conceal the evidence related to the two murdered lovers. He swore Lucas to secrecy and promised the slave his freedom as long as he and no one else on the property said a word about the incident. Nobody outside the plantation knew what happened. There were rumors, but nobody dared speak. And then word spread throughout the country that the mistress of the house and the blacksmith left together one evening. So they felt bad for the master, because his wife ran off with the blacksmith. That was horrible, and how dare she be so ungrateful, etc., etc. And then he found another young woman. She agreed to marry him, and on their wedding day, they had all the people from the area attend, and it was wealthy landowners and politicians from Annapolis and, people from Delaware and Pennsylvania. Just as the best man was making the wedding toast, there was a clanging sound coming from outside the home. And they tried to ignore it, but it grew louder and was soon accompanied by loud whinnying of a horse. So when the members of the wedding party ran to the windows, they focused their eyes on a large white stallion that was tied beside the blacksmith shop. The animal was rearing up on its hind legs. Furiously, it was slamming its front hooves against the top of the anvil. And the clanging grew louder, and guests that had run to the porch were amazed at what they saw. The horse was out of control and trying to break away from the anvil to which it had been tied. And as the animal yanked back on the reins, the anvil overturned. The master stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the scene. One of the three men who tried earlier to subdue the horse were close in action and shouted that he saw the top of a human skull in the fresh hole that the horse had dug. So that's what he gets for standing them up and making them look at each other for eternity. The animal backed away. A few men grabbed tools, and soon they pulled out the bones that appeared to be human skeletons. They recognized the clothing of the wife and the blacksmith. And, of course, women screamed and men began running, and all heck broke loose.
All heck?
All heck. Well, okay, all hell broke loose. The new bride was horrified and moved away from her groom, hiding behind members of her family. The master kind of broke down and was babbling incoherently. He said he knew nothing. He claimed to be as surprised as anyone. A few close friends believed him, but most did not. The riddle was solved when Lucas the old slave walked from the shed and described the murders. He added that he, his family, and all the other slaves had been threatened with death if they ever spoke the truth. "Lies," shouted the master beside, "the testimony of a slave is not admissible in a court of law." And as soon as words passed his lip, the master groaned, realizing that just at that very morning, during the excitement of his wedding day, he had signed the old servant's freedom papers, the ones Lucas was now waving in the air. His former slave had spoken as a free man. Gotcha. He ended up killing himself, and the most memorable was the sight of a large horse standing on his hind legs, carrying a ghostly rider wearing a tall black hat and cracking a whip. This is for many years afterwards. So the manor house was destroyed, the land sold off, and there was nothing else to be done, except people still hear the clanging of the anvil and seeing the horse.
Where do you get this story from?
I guess from history. Cecil County has a lot, the Historical Society of Cecil County has a lot of really good stories, a lot of good information on the history of the area.
Interesting.
So maybe that some of it's embellished. Again, you don't know.
I mean,
He didn't have a personal experience. This is what
yeah,
he found during his history.
It's like a folklore kind of
Yeah.
tale.
Sure.
Cool.
But I thought it was kind of neat because it was near where we
Yeah.
were.
Yes.
And you had that experience in our house, and I always felt maybe that was because that area was, a lot of indigenous area. We used to find arrowheads when we were kids, and I just remembered that recently. We'd find them every once in a while.
Interesting. Yeah. All right.
And, that's just one of many, but I picked it because it was Fair Hill.
Yeah. And we
It was
have a little,
close to home and,
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. This one he also had a personal experience with. And I had a personal experience, not directly, but I know of it. There is in Elkton, just sort of southeast of the town, there's a place called Delancey Road that connects Route 40 and Old Baltimore Pike.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a shortcut that you can go through that. And there's a development called Turnquist, which I think were townhomes. And there were other developments around there. December of 1963, there was a plane crash. A plane was struck by lightning and crashed in that area. I think there were 81 passengers and crew were struck by lightning. And it was a Boeing 707, which that was before the current day of Boeing issues. But it was circling overhead waiting to land at Philadelphia Airport. So they were waiting for landing clearance. I was in bed. It was in the evening. I don't remember what time it was, but it was dark. And I remember being in bed and seeing this flash of light in that direction, and found out later that the flash of light was the lightning hitting the plane, and the plane
wow.
went down into a field.
Wow.
Into a field, and everyone was killed. It was a disaster, true disaster.
Ugh.
There was nothing saved at all, just bits and pieces. And I heard stories of people going in and picking up rings, and but all the gruesomeness of the cleanup and the responders having to go in, and I can't imagine. But that was a big story. But again, it wasn't that far from where I lived, where I grew up. I saw the flash. I remember in '63, that was, I guess I would have been
You weren't
12,
even in high school
12.
yet, yeah.
No, I was 12. And I was actually a junior bridesmaid in my cousin's wedding. And this is going to be an important fact when we get to the end of the story. That she was married in November, the same day that JFK was shot. John F. Kennedy was killed in Dallas. Her wedding day was on that same day, and I was a junior bridesmaid in her wedding. Also in that area.
Wow.
And it was in Newark, but it's in a church in Newark, but it's, just the general area.
I'm sorry I'm smiling. I'm not laughing at the story. I'm laughing at that exact thing happened in Mad Men.
Really?
It ruined her wedding.
Oh my gosh.
It was,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, I'm just remembering Mad Men, the show.
I didn't.
Sorry, not laughing.
So anyway, they actually built homes nearby afterwards, and there's been issues with people, having ghosts around.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Because 83 people were that's a large number, 81. That certain homes in one particular development named Turnquist seem to be associated with paranormal activity. While there's no way to prove if this claim is true, the steady number of leads from this locale makes one wonder if it might be something into the rumor. It's generally believed that this area's haunted reputation is an event that occurred more than 50 years ago. This was in 2010, so it's more than that now. It was a freak late autumn thunderstorm occurred. The lightning bolt hit the left wing, causing a deadly spark in the reserve fuel tank. The explosion was immediate, and much of the human remains and plane wreckage fell upon farm fields surrounding Delancey Road. One area resident said there were so many holes in the area after the crash that for a time folks called the rural lane Crater Road. Mentioned the crash in the Newark, Delaware, Elkton, Maryland area, and some people are eager to talk about where they were the moment the explosion occurred. Others claim to have seen the flash of light or heard loud, unusual sound when the tragic incident occurred. There were no survivors. Authorities closed off the roads, and the rescue workers respectfully gathered every physical remnant of the crash they could find, but it was impossible to discover and secure everything. Years went by, land was sold, developers erected townhouses, multi-story apartments, and more recently, larger single-family homes. During the construction of each new residential neighborhood, locals who were aware of the airplane disaster would say, "The ground is haunted," or "I shouldn't live here on top of these poor lost souls." But to others, such talk was silly folklore, old-fashioned superstition, mumbo-jumbo nonsense, and old wives' tale. Besides, most of the new residents were out-of-towners, unfamiliar with the area's history. What they didn't know couldn't hurt them. Ignorance is bliss, usually. Sandy's story is typical of several I've heard over the years from residents of home located on both sides of Delancey Road. A young mother in her 30s, Sandy resides in Turnquist with her 2 children. She said she's lived in 2 homes in that same development. Her current residence is fine, quiet, with no unusual activity, but she said, shaking her head, "I couldn't wait to get out of the other one." During our conversation, she said her previous residence, only about 2 blocks away, caused her a lot of sleepless nights. "I was having a nightmare. I had a lot of nightmares there," she said. "Felt like there was a presence. I couldn't wake up out of my sleep. When I did get up, I was shaking. On other nights, I felt something pressing down on me on my bed. I couldn't get up, couldn't move. I was scared. I thought there was something wrong with me." These nightmare incidents, combined with strange sounds throughout the house, feelings as if she were being followed, footsteps running along the upstairs hallway, and reports by her son and daughter that someone was lurking in their doorway at night, caused Sandy to approach her pastor. "By the time I was trying to get my life in order and wanted to get closer to God," she said. She waited after church on Sunday morning, and even though embarrassed, she explained her unusual and troubling home life situation. "He agreed to come to my house and perform an exorcism. He and another couple brought with him. We all joined hands, formed a circle, and prayed together. Then we went from room to room and prayed out loud. I remember him announcing he was in my home to cast out the evil spirits. He thought she might be a focus of spiritual warfare, with dark and light forces fighting for her attention control." She also added that living on top of the plane crash site with who knows what was under the houses might have been a contributing factor to her problems. So she's not saying that it was the plane crash, but it might be, and I don't know.
I mean, I guess religious figures are going to be like, "It's evil and only I can save you."
Yeah, I don't know.
But that sounds like a lot. I mean, yes, she's having a lot of problems, but that sounds like something reaching out and being like, "I'm here, pay attention to me."
Yeah, really. And why would she think it would be evil that would be cast out?
Evil?
I know.
Stop. That's why you just talk to things. It's a person. Most likely, it's going to be a person. Just talk to it like a person.
So they may not even know that they're dead.
Right.
And they're just like, what are you doing in my house?
Or it's like there's something going on. They're in a loop, or maybe something. They're like, I can't get out of the loop. I need help.
But again, that's a thing that people, the first thought they go to is it's got to be something evil.
It's a demon.
Yeah, really. No.
Come on.
And how much is that her imagination? I mean, she knew about the plane crash. There are lots of stories about things moving around in houses in the neighborhood, and people live there seeing things, but you don't think about it. Really don't believe them unless things start happening to you.
So. I mean, I've had friends that lived in Turnquist.
So it sounds like some were, some weren't.
Yeah.
So we asked her if it calmed down after the cleansing, and she said it did for a little bit, then started up again. We were renting, so we moved out as soon as we could get out of the house. But the number of people who have come and gone quickly after we left, there's something wrong with the place. So it's the
I'm
house.
like, can you tell me? I'll buy
it. So she thought she was kind of going crazy, but then she moved out and things got better.
I mean, I'm already living with ghosts as it is, so like, why not?
So she said that sometimes when I think back on the time I lived there, I thought maybe someone was murdered in the house, or that an evil spirit had stayed behind, or that there were bad things under the spot it was built on. So again, that might be true.
Yeah.
You never know what you're building on in the history of what you're building on. When he first said in the beginning, sometimes it's the land.
I said it once and I'll say it again. Ghosts are like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Shout out Kitty.
So he said he actually lived in Turnquist for 5 years and had no knowledge of the tragedy before I moved on. And yes, there was unusual and unexplained activities of the cold spot, door closing, phantom footsteps, and cabinet slamming variety in my house.
Hmm.
So he didn't know about, there was the plane crash when he was there, but my son still believes the house is haunted. Periodically, the Cecil Wig newspaper runs a column about the plane crash, and the reporter often interviews various residents. So, and then of the 13 people polled for the piece, 10 residents acknowledged hearing ghost stories about their community. So there were sightings involving small children and screaming children and spirits mostly milling around. That I could understand. Okay, maybe you would have that.
You're like, what happened? We were in an airplane and now we're not.
Yeah, really. Most of those quoted stressed that it was spirited visitors were usually friendly or sad, but not hateful or vengeful.
Right.
There was another resident told the reporter in the wig that wrote the stories that she woke in the middle of the night and saw a little blonde boy standing at the foot of her bed. Initially, she thought it was a dream or her young son roaming the house, and then it occurred a few more times.
It's Jonas.
Yes, standing at the bottom of your bed.
Yes, that happens multiple times.
Not wanting to bother her child or husband, she kept the incidents to herself, and eventually the husband told her he was bothered about seeing a little blonde-haired boy in the middle of the night. At first he thought it was his son, but then he realized it wasn't. When the man reached out to touch the youngster and asked, "What's wrong, buddy?" the little boy vanished. During some family gatherings at the woman's troubled home, she said she had noticed young children standing at the foot of the stairs looking up at the second-floor landing. Whenever such an incident occurred, the homeowner said she would grab the youngster up and lead him or her away from the area before the child had an opportunity to talk about what he or she might have seen.
Yeah. Like, nope.
She said sometimes women say, "I don't even want to know what you have to say." Kennedy was killed in December 1963, but I think he was assassinated November 22nd. There was a story that was going around as a tale that conspiracy theory saying that the crash was intentional because there was someone, because of the story about the assassination, that they felt that it was a witness or somebody involved in the president's killing was on that plane, heading to Philly to give a sworn statement about the conspiracy to the Department of Justice officials in Philadelphia.
Oh.
But the mystery witness has been silenced when he was blown out of sky. But
why would he be going to Philly? Wouldn't he be going to D.C.? Or was he coming from D.C.? Or
Well, there's the Philadelphia Federal Building, so he went Department of Justice officials in the Philadelphia Federal Building. You would think he would go to D.C., but I don't know. And then in 1993, to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the deadly crash, Elkton town officials placed a granite memorial marker at the landscaped area of the entrance road of the development. It states, in memory of the 81 men, women, and children who lost their lives when Pan Am Flight 214 crashed at this site on December 8th, 1963.
That's so funny because Pan Am was also the crash in Mad Men.
So maybe they got that from this.
Maybe so. They stole your cousin. Was it your cousin that got married? Who was?
Yeah, my cousin.
Yeah, they stole her story from Mad Men. The Pan Am crash. Sorry, gotta lighten this
weird
mood.
Synchronicities exist.
Yes.
And
well, it looks like we're gonna go take a road trip down there too.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. We
take
need
a picture.
To do
we should do spirit box sessions.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So we know where that is.
Great
and actually,
idea, Mom.
There is a car dealership that is there now as well.
Huh.
For a long time, there wasn't anything close to the road. I mean, on that corner.
Yeah.
But now there's a big car dealership there too, and I've always wondered, why didn't they have that as a memorial? Just take the whole property and have it as a memorial.
Right. But and money.
Or nobody thought of it at that point. Anyway, that's all I have.
Okay.
And I know that's gone on a lot longer than
it's okay.
I thought it would be. But
that's fine. And I'll just maybe we'll do a double episode, like a two-parter for this week. So part 1 finished. Thank you for listening. If you have a story you'd like to tell us, please email us at onlyghostsinthebuilding@gmail.com, or you can find us on Instagram at onlyghostsinthebuilding or Facebook at onlyghostsinthebuilding. We also have a Patreon at patreon.com/onlyghostsinthebuilding, and you can come join for free, or we have a $1 a month tier or a $5 a month tier. Come check us out. We have a lot of good content there. I really enjoy the app and all its capabilities. You can listen, you can watch, and you can read and check out all our content right on there. We have merch for sale at onlyghostsinthebuilding.com. There's some really cute stuff, including kids' clothes. Go check that out. Thank you so much. We will see you soon.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.